Okay. Well, we haven't done this topic, but we did do this topic a few years ago, but I had someone else do a talk on it. But I have always wanted to do it myself, to be honest, because I've been studying this topic for years. And of course, being on a college campus, I've seen a lot of issues with this. We've done it at our campus meetings, and my daughter did an internship with the pro-life ministry here in Columbus a couple summers ago. She did a lot of work um, with a pro-life ministry, and we partnered with some pro-life ministries here on campus. So I do have some experience with this. I obviously don't do necessarily pro-life apologetics full time. I mean, those are for people that make their living doing that. I do mostly campus apologetics and outreach, which cover a wide variety of topics with obviously an emphasis on reaching Jewish people for the gospel. But anyways, so anyway, um, if you want to go deeper on this, I highly recommend some of these books. The newest edition, The Case for Life by Scott Klusendorf. He's one of the pro-life specialists. The second edition came out, I think, over the past year. That's a really, really great book just to start equipping you if you want to go deeper on that. You had the book called Unplanned by Abby Johnson. I think that became a movie of some kind. I think I recall that. Uh, she used to work for Planned Parenthood, and she certainly exposed a lot of what they do. And you can read about that in that book. And then Francis Beckwith's book, Defending Life, is a really good book. He handles a lot of objections in that book. But if you really want to be rounded about, the theological issues, the scientific issues, the philosophical issues, the legal issues, politically, those are all good books to get your hands on if you just want to go deeper. Okay. And also, you can go to Scott's website, Scott Klusendorf, prolifetraining.com. He has a lot of resources on there. You can also watch a lot of his debates. He's got a lot of debates on YouTube. So you're welcome, obviously, to look at his work. He's one of the most active pro-life apologists that are out there. There's a few others, but he certainly doing a lot of work. So you can check out the website. There's a lot of resources on there. Okay, so we have to go through a lot of definitions, and I just want to make clear that when we're talking about abortion, in this particular talk, I'm mostly going to be talking about elective abortion. If you think about, there's a difference between what we call therapeutic abortion and an elective abortion. Sometimes we talk about abortions that are medically necessary, like if a woman's life's in jeopardy, or she has like an ectopic pregnancy, or there's a health issue. I'll talk about the percentage of those that are really out there, because it's very, very, very small where the woman's life is in jeopardy. It's a very small percentage. But for the same token, that's not really what we're focused on. We're mostly talking about an elective abortion tonight. That's where someone out of choice ends the pregnancy. Now, obviously, when it comes to legislation, this plays a role in what's covered by health insurance, but technically from a medical and a legislation perspective, that play a role in how we define those and what we're talking about. But obviously people choose to have an elective abortion for many reasons. Sometimes they may not want to be pregnant or have a child. Sometimes they're not financially or emotionally stable to support a child. May be an issue if they have too many kids they can't support anymore. They live in an unstable, abusive relationship. Um, there's all kinds of reasons. I'll talk about those more. I have a statistic of why most women have an elective abortion. Um, like I said, a therapeutic abortion that's medically necessary because there might be a high risk of dying during pregnancy or childbirth, or the pregnancy can cause serious or medical complications, or there's a high risk of fetal death during pregnancy, a miscarriage, or shortly after birth, a stillbirth. Um, like I said, I'm mostly going to be focused on elective abortion in this talk. Okay. So I want to make that clear. Also, I want to make clear that I know this is a sensitive topic, and if there's anybody on the call that has gone through this or walked others through it, I know it's hard and I know it's a sensitive topic. So we're not doing this call to condemn anybody. We're not here to, wreak guilt on anybody. We're simply trying to go over some of the facts of the issue and hopefully equip others, equip us and know how to talk about people, to talk to others about this, and, hopefully build our apologetic toolkit, so we're able to converse with others about this topic and hopefully walk others through if they're struggling with it, right? Now, when it comes to the Bible, the Bible never specifically addresses the issue of abortion, but there are certainly numerous teachings in Scripture that make it abundantly clear what God's view of abortion is. Okay. Now, personally, when I'm defending what do we call a pro-life position, I don't always go to the Bible. I don't necessarily need to. I think there's enough to go off of that. I don't need to point to Scripture. They're not against Scripture. Someone asked me to point to Scripture, I'm going to point to what I'm showing you right now. I'm just saying I can go off the scientific, philosophical, and other evidence to talk about why I would take a pro-life position. So we know that, biblically speaking, if you read Jeremiah 1:5, we know that God tells Jeremiah before God sent him on a mission to be a preacher or proclaimer to the nations, that God knew him in his womb, right? Talks about Jeremiah 1:5, before I formed you in the womb, I knew who you were. I knew what I called you and everything. So God seems to know Jeremiah well before, he comes out of the womb, right? Obviously. We know that in Exodus 21 to 22 to 25 prescribes a penalty, a death, for someone who causes the death of a baby in the womb, or it's for someone who commits murder. So we know that this law and its punishment indicate that God considers a baby in the womb to be just as much as a human being as a full-grown adult. We know that biblically, abortion is a matter of life or death of a human being made in God's image, because we think everybody's created in the image and likeness of God, as we'll talk more about. We also have a passage, of course, in Psalm 139, 13 to 16, where David writes, "For you created my inmost being, you knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place. I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." So that's a pretty clear indication of God's involvement in, how he makes humans, and he's involved in the process, the entire process, right? So anyway, so those are some biblical passages to look at. But like I said, if you talk to somebody and they ask you, hey, is there anything in the Bible that speaks about abortion? You could say, you could point to some of these passages, obviously, but like I said, you don't necessarily have to, if you just have a good, robust understanding of some of the things we're going to talk about tonight. Now, we know that in Genesis 2:7, that, when God, when he breathes, he forms a man from the dust of the ground and breathes into his nostrils a breath of life, or God breathes his ruach, his spirit, into the first man. We know that man becomes a living being, right? And so God is breathing life into this first man, right? Through the ruach, through the spirit. And, just biblically speaking, this individual, of course, the first man was endowed with life, right? So when we talk about personhood, we know that personhood proceeds, from someone, obviously, who's given life. So personhood is connected to life, right? Because the big debate in abortion, of course, is personhood. As I'll talk about, is the fetus a human being? Is it a human? Is it really a human? Okay. And personhood, obviously is like I said, personhood is related to life. So when God breathes life into somebody, that is linked with personhood. Okay. Okay. So like I said, you're welcome to use the Bible all you want, but like I said, I think there's other things you can talk about as well. Now, as far as people don't like when Christians say abortion is murder, they don't like that. They think it's too abrasive or too it brings too much condemnation. They really hate it. Pro-choice advocates and obviously even some Christians maybe not like that language. We know that murder is defined as the unlawful, premeditated killing of one human being by another. Murder is an unlawful killing, that is, killing that is done by the judgment of one human being against another for personal or reasons. Okay, of course, the Bible condemns murder. God hates the shedding of innocent blood. We know that that's a big no for him. So there is a lot about that in Scripture. But the way you want to frame the argument, okay, if you're ever talking about the pro-life position, is really the way Scott Klusecourt does it. Determining whether or not abortion is murder would involve the following consideration, and this is what it all boils down to. It's whether or not a fetus is actually a human being. Second, if the fetus is a child, right? If the fetus is actually a human being, then yes, it would be murder, because what the argument is you would follow the argument this way. This is the way I always present it to people. This is the way I had two girls come up to me once on campus, and there had been a pro-life group out that day, and they saw all these abortion pictures and things, and they said, well, I don't like that. What do you think about that? And I said to him, well, let me just ask you a question. Do you think it is morally wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being? And they kind of looked at me with a blank stare, because they didn't really know that's what abortion is. Okay. So the argument goes, it is morally wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. Premise two, abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being. Therefore, abortion is morally wrong. Now, obviously, this argument is going to be contingent or dependent on whether the fetus is a human being, whether that is an actual human being, at conception, or of course, anything after that, it's a real human being. Okay. And of course, people are going to debate that it's not. But that's the whole crux of the debate. Is it a human being? Because if it is a human being, then abortion intentionally, notice it's intentional. It's not by accident. Okay. Elective abortion is where you intentionally choose to end a life. Okay. So that is the way I present the argument right there. Every single time, whenever I get in these debates, I just say, do you believe it's morally wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being? And then, of course, they might push back and say, well, it's not a human being. It's not a human being. It's just a clump of cells, which is ridiculous because we're all clumps of cells. Even adults are clumps of cells. So, people just haven't thought deeply about it. Or maybe they haven't, or maybe they have. But the point is, that's the way Scott frames the argument. That's the way I frame it as well. Okay, so when people say they're fighting for reproductive rights, it's really just a synonym for abortion. Okay, I know we hear a lot about reproductive rights in these political discussions, but the question becomes, are you fighting for the right to intentionally kill an innocent human being? That's what I know. Is that what you're talking about when you say reproductive rights? Because that's basically, you've changed the language, and that's basically, I want to know if that's what you're really asking for. You want to fight for, some people, there's people out there that want abortion enshrined everywhere. They want it everywhere. They don't want any limitations. And, obviously they will fight and fight and fight for what they say are reproductive rights. So that's what I would ask back at that. That's what they mean by reproductive rights. Now, we know that all the embryology textbooks say that life begins at conception. It's not debated one iota. Okay. If you look at this definition here by Keith Moore, he talks about this very clearly, about a zygote fertilizing is the beginning of a new human being. And he goes on to talk about human development begins at fertilization. So he talks about, this is a new, unique individual. Okay, of course, zygote is that scientific term for the new life is created when sperm and egg combine. So it's not debated in any of the embryology textbooks that this is a new life. There's another one right here. The zygote formed here is the beginning of a new human being. Same thing in the book Before We Are Born: Essentials of Embryology, 7th edition. So that's not, like I said, it's not debated at all. So, you know, when we say this, we're talking about, once again, is a fetus a human or is it something else? When the mother's egg and the father's sperm come together, they combine and create a new strand of DNA that's personalized and totally unique. You receive all your chromosomes, you receive a genetic code, obviously. DNA is a coded information. Of course, it's a blueprint for your growth and development. You receive that at conception. So you don't get any new genetic material, not any genetic material is added to you. So the zygote in the womb is as human as the mother in whose womb it dwells. So if that's the case, then that's the bottom line. And so the bottom line is that let me skip ahead here. Just one thing I just want to mention. We know that abortion kills something that's alive because we know that whatever at conception grows, whatever comes in to be a conception, it grows. This new human grows. We know dead things don't grow. So it is alive. It is a life. Okay. So, the whole crux of the debate, once again, is it human? Is it a human? Now, we know that what happens is some people like to talk about, like to point to the fact that it's not human because of size. Maybe maybe it's not really human because it has to grow more. It has to be a certain amount of weeks before it's actually, we can call it a human. Okay. And so they're basing that on the size argument. That's problematic because it is true, embryos are smaller than newborns and adults. That's true. But, do you really say that people based on certain sizes are more valuable than others? That new human that came into existence has its entire genetic code. Okay. So are you going to tell me that you're going to say that's not a human because it's not a certain size? Size is not what gives you value. Okay. Size does not determine the value of human. Okay. Also, same with level of development. Obviously, some embryos and fetuses are less developed. Of course, they're less developed than you and I, but that's irrelevant as well because 4-year-olds and of course are less developed than 14-year-olds. But we know that we don't value them less just based on level of development. We don't value people less based on level of development. So to say, well, the newborn is not really as developed as a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old. Well, you don't kill a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old because you don't kill a 1-year-old because it's less developed than a 2-year-old, of course, right? So sometimes people get in their minds, there's something about that clicks in their minds, like this really isn't a human, it's not quite a human, it's got to grow more, it's got to be a certain size, it's got to be more developed. That's a real problem. Okay. It's a real problem. And of course, you can't go by degree of dependency. If viability bestows human value, then all those who depend on insulin or kidney medication are valuable and we may kill them. So, it is true that, humans differ immensely, of course, with talents, accomplishments, and abilities. Some people obviously have greater cognitive ability than others. Some people are more physically capable than others. There's all kinds of differences, but we don't base human value on that. We base human value on something else, okay? It's because we share a common nature, okay? And so what we want to emphasize is that our view is that no human being, regardless of size, level of development, race, gender, or place of residence should be excluded from the moral community of human persons, okay? That's what the pro-life position is. Once again, no human being, regardless of size, level of development, race, gender, or place of residence, should be excluded from the moral community of human persons. Okay? Now, there's two different views out there. One is called the endowment view and the performance view. And what pro-life advocates are always advocating for is the endowment view, which says that all human beings, regardless of size, level of development, environment, degree of dependency, race, class, gender, other characteristics, have intrinsic value in virtue of their shared human nature. So intrinsic value means that you simply have value in virtue of what you are, not what you appear as or what you can or cannot do. It's not based on your functions, what you can do or can't do. Because obviously many people can perform different functions, and some people can perform not near as good as functions as others, and people have all kinds of capabilities, and some people have less capabilities. So we don't give value based on performance or based on function. Okay. If that's the case, then once again, you could just obviously, like some countries do, they just say, hey, you don't want a Down syndrome child, then you have the freedom to kill it. Because you know that baby cannot perform as a regular human. That baby has disabilities and things like that. So that child's going to have disabilities. So they give you the right to terminate it. So the endowment view obviously is the one that we are endorsing. So I think we know that the endowment view also falls in line probably with as you guys know, the Declaration of Independence, which says we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay. Now, obviously, from a biblical perspective and a Christian perspective, we believe God gives us value. God endows it with us. He just, it's part of being human. He created us and we're made in his image, and he endows us with value. We don't earn it. We don't get less of it. It's something that he bestows on all humans, right? Because he created us in his image. So we all have value. We have dignity and value, right? Imago Dei. So that's something that crosses all humans, no matter where, all cultures, all places, all humans have that same value. Now, obviously, some people don't believe that. They believe some humans have more value than others. Obviously, Hitler didn't believe Jews had a whole lot of value. We've, had a lot of problems with racism. Some believe that blacks didn't have any value, right? And it still happens today sometimes, of course. We believe, human trafficking, kids are being trafficked. I saw a new huge human trafficking problem out of the border. Problems just getting worse and worse, that kids are being trafficked nonstop. So a lot of people don't think children have value. The list goes on. Obviously, a lot of people don't live as if people are endowed with value by God. Okay, we don't always live that way. We don't treat people that way. Now, we talked about personhood before. Remember that from a Christian perspective, we believe that God gives us an essence or a nature. And so we have a shared nature. Okay. We are not globs of matter, just a clump of matter. And we're not just the children in the womb are not just potential persons. Okay. They are persons by their very nature. Okay. And so, it's something we need to remember. What is it that defines us as humans, and what is personhood? Okay. So once again, to bring it back to what I brought up before, the abortion controversy focuses on just one question: is the unborn a member of the human family? Let me say that again. Is the unborn a member of the human family? If this is so, killing him or her to benefit others is a serious moral wrong. Okay. It treats the distinct human being with his own intrinsic worth as nothing more than a disposable instrument. Now, conversely, let me say the opposite. If the unborn are not human, then elective abortion is fine. Yeah, I mean, this is a way pro-life people are wasting their time. Okay. Elective abortion would be morally justified, just as the same as having a tooth pulled. So the bottom line is the unborn a member of the human family? Is Gray Kokel says, you ever go to his website, go to Stand to Reasons, he says, if the unborn are not human, no justification for elective abortion is necessary. But if the unborn are human, no justification for elective abortion is adequate. Okay. Now, obviously, to say that this is not to say that abortion is easy for women. I'm not trying to downplay that. I will talk about the role of how we need to view women in the situation. Pro-life advocates always get the club. People bring out the club against them, saying that you don't seem to care about the woman. All you care is about the baby in the womb. You don't care about what happens after the baby. All you care about is the baby's born. The baby isn't put to intentionally killed. It seems like all you care about, you don't care about the woman. That's just not true at all. That is not true. Okay. It is true that this is a very psychologically complex and agonizing thing for some women. I'll talk about that towards the end. But we don't want to confuse what's morally right because of conflicting emotions or emotional trauma. I know emotional trauma is real and I know it's painful, but we don't want to let that to completely take away from the moral issues here. Okay. Pro-life advocates, all of them I know, care about the women very, very much, and the reason they're pro-life because they think it hurts the child and the woman. Okay. And everyone believes from the womb to the tomb. We care about the child from the womb to the tomb. Now, that doesn't mean that every pro-life advocate can adopt every child there is. Probably most of us can't afford it, but we may try. And does it mean that we should do better at getting churches to be resources for women and Christian groups to be resources for women when they have this struggle of what they're supposed to do? Yes. And there are a lot of churches that do a really good job with it. Some of them need to get better, of course. There's a lot of work that can be done there. So there's no way we want to minimize the psychological complexity of this. But once again, the issue, we're talking about the morality of the issue mostly here. Let's look at some common objections, though, that come up a lot with the abortion topic. The first one, of course, one of them always comes up is rape. And obviously, if someone has been raped, that is absolutely traumatic, and we don't want to try to minimize that at all. Absolutely a terrible thing. I have seen stories of kids that were conceived in rape. They talked about, my mom didn't abort me and I was conceived and here I am. It does happen sometimes. Rape is a very, very low rape. Only 1% of abortions could be traced to cases of rape or incest. Okay, about 1%. So the question becomes, because of rape or incest, does that mean we should then allow all elective abortion? Should we allow all the other cases of people that, just get pregnant, from having sex and now they have to eliminate a child? Is that really the justification for all other abortions? It is true that a child who is conceived in rape and incest is still made in the image of God. And the question becomes, of course, why shouldn't that child's life be protected just as much as any other human being? The circumstances are definitely difficult, but they don't determine the worth of that child. So, we could say on paper that the best thing to do is obviously put the child up for adoption or something like that, or just don't make the child pay for the rapist's crime. That would be the ideal situation. Should the baby in the situation be punished for the sins of her father or his or her father? The point is that we need to be there for a rape victim. We need to walk them through the possibilities of what could happen here. But the challenge is, though, like I said, just to use, when people bring up rape, it's almost like, which I'm not trying to minimize it at all, but if it's 1% of abortions can be traced to rape, the question becomes, does this justify all the other elective abortions, which we've had 64 million since Roe, 64 million abortions. So anyway, those are some things to think about there. Like I said, I don't want to minimize rape at all. I'm not trying to do that. But there are some women that have had the baby, of course. They have been conceived, kids have been conceived. But we just need to think that through. Um, as far as the life of the mother being at risk, um, you have like an ectopic pregnancy where the child is the mother's life is in jeopardy or something like that, or there's some other ones. There's one doctor here that says that less than 1% of all abortions are performed to save a mother's life. Um, there's another one. Dr. Irving Kushner, professor at UCLA School of Medicine, testified before the U.S. Senate, was asked how often abortions are necessary to save the life of the mother, preserve physical health. His response in this country, about 1%. There it is again, like a 1%. There's another statistic, over 1,000 OB-GYNs and maternal healthcare experts signed a statement in 2012 saying, in part, as experienced practitioners and researchers, we affirm the direct abortion, the purposeful destruction of the unborn child is not medically necessary to save the life of a woman. So the point is that, you'll see a lot of abortion legislation, of course, exceptions for the life of if the mother's at risk and things like that. Yeah, that's an issue. I'm not saying it isn't. I'm just saying, though, that, the question becomes, should we allow all other abortions, elective abortions, because of this issue? Now, I agree that women whose lives are at risk should not have to carry a child. If they're going to die, no, that's what happens with ectopic pregnancies, which are very rare, but you have to save the life of a mother, and that has to happen. I'm not, but remember, when a female has an ectopic pregnancy and it has to eliminate the child, that's not intentionally killing a child. That's not the same thing. Okay, they're not intentionally setting out to kill the child. It's not. It's not like they're. It's something that's what we went back to that. The other kind of abortion. It's abortion that's medically necessary. Okay, it's a little different than an elective abortion, right? I mean, it's very different than what we call an elective abortion, right? A purposeful or direct abortion. Okay. Um, of course, a lot of times people say, well, the issues between a woman and her doctor. Women have the right to make their own private decisions, stay out of it. That's a common objection. Um, Obviously, if we're going to, it boils down to, once again, is the unborn a human? Okay, because we know that if a woman had a 2-year-old in front of them, we know that definitely, and she wanted to kill that 2-year-old, we know you would stop them, right? Most likely, if you had a good functioning conscience, you would say, you can't do this in the privacy of your bedroom. Of course, you can't just terminate a 2-year-old or a 1-year-old. So once again, if the unborn is human, it's really problematic to say they should be killed in the name of privacy. No different than a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old. So once again, it goes back to, is the unborn a human? Same issue. And then, of course, you hear a lot, it's my body, my choice, full bodily autonomy. Notice that the statement is an if then. It's so we call hypothetical syllogism. If then, where the second half, the then statement builds upon the fact of the if statement. So you're assuming that, once again, that it boils back to the same issue: is the unborn a member of the human race? Okay, because if that that person growing in you, I mean, if this new life that you have in your body is a human, then it's no longer strictly your body. Okay, you've got another human growing inside of you. Okay, so you can't really split those apart as much as you like. It's kind of like saying, if I'm going to eat 2 packages of Skittles and deal with the consequences myself, I mean, that's not affecting somebody else. Okay, and you have authority certainly to do that, but in this case, you have another human involved. So once again, it boils down to, is that unborn a member of the human race? If so, then technically it's not just about your body anymore. Okay, it's their body. Okay. Another one is that, you shouldn't, what if, women should not be forced to bring an unwanted child into the world? who wants to be part of a family that rejects you, right? If you're not wanted, maybe kill you. Um, Once again, I don't really know what else to say except that you're basically assuming the option is, that the child's not wanted, therefore kill it. Um, Obviously you don't do that to a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, or any age group, right? People do that to their kids. They kill their kids sometimes, obviously. Um, but basically it boils down to the same thing. If that child is part of the human race, and basically you're saying to go ahead and kill the child because they're not wanted. Okay. Um, okay, that's the same from I'm sorry. Now, what about this issue of people say, you're bringing into what we call the metaphysics of religionness. You're getting into your views about reality, your worldview. You're bringing your worldview into it. You're bringing your religious beliefs into it. Um, it's true that the claim that the embryo has value is certainly grounded in a worldview that admits a transcendent starting point for human rights and human value. Of course, if you're a Christian, I mean, that's basic 101, right? I mean, that God has created everybody his image and everybody has value, right? That's just common sense. But everybody has a worldview, and the bottom line is, if you're going to have a worldview, which that worldview is the way you explain reality, right? It's an application, interpretation of the world around you. But if you have a different worldview than mine, and your worldview is basically materialism, where or secularism, I mean, depending how you define secularism, but if you think that we are all just globs of matter and we're just accidents of nature, and that everything in the universe, all of us came about by blind physical processes and random chance, um and if you think human beings are cosmic accidents, um you have no grounding for human rights. You have no grounding for human dignity and no grounding for moral obligations. They're kind of made up. They're subjective. It's it's whatever you want it to be. I mean, it's basically your opinion. But of course, with our worldview, a theistic or Christian worldview, we're saying that the world we have is a transcendent starting point for human rights and human value. I have no problem with admitting that. Um, Another common objection, I've heard this a lot, is the foster care system's broken. If you have all these pregnancies, people that get pregnant and they are forced to put their child in the foster care system, you're putting a child into a broken system. Therefore, why not just have the option to terminate the child, or to intentionally eliminate the child? Um, it is true the foster care system, from what I understand, America is broken. There are problems with it. It needs a lot of improvement. I've talked to people who've been in foster care. Some of them turned out okay. It was rough. I'm not trying to downplay it. Maybe some of us here have been foster care. I don't know. I don't want to downplay that at all or minimize it. As of September 30th, 2019, there were about 424,000 kids in placement with the foster care system. A third of those kids were placed with some kind of relative, and the remaining 2/3 are in the care of a non-relative adult, or more rarely placed in a public institution of some sort. But basically, the argument you're making is that you want the option to kill or intentionally, kill a child rather than letting him go into foster care. Okay. Once again, if the unborn is a member of the human race, then you want the option to be able to kill the child. Now, like I said, there are a lot of people who went through the foster care system and become happy and accomplished adults. And obviously, there's some who went through the foster care system that had hard lives, and of course, pass that on to their family. So I'm not downplaying that at all. But basically, what you're saying is, if the foster care system is broken, has problems, then we should have the right to terminate a kid. So we'd have to think that through, obviously. Now, some people point to the issues, Christian pro-lifers and religious arguments, they violate the separation of church and state. Um, it doesn't, they don't understand what they're talking about, the separation of church and state. I don't think they understand what that really means. But the bottom line is, as Francis Beckworth says, arguments are either true or false, valid or invalid. When someone brings this up, I just go back to Scott's Clusidor syllogism. I'm just like, I just want to know what you say right here. Is it morally wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being? And do you think that abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being? So is abortion morally wrong? So I'm just going to go right back to that every time. Okay. Now, remember that, if you're going to make this argument, then you could say abolitionist Christians were imposing their views, or Martin Luther King was imposing his views. Okay, you get into this issue. Okay, who's imposing their views? The issue is whose morality is being imposed and what morality is correct. Okay, because all positions are moral positions, and all laws legislate a moral position. It's always about morality. Okay, for people that want to say keep religion out, they're just basically saying, I want secular morality to prevail. I want a godless morality to prevail. Okay. Now, when it came to the Roe versus Wade decision that was reversed a couple years ago when President Trump appointed those judges, as we know, which some people are still mad about, of course. It is true that there is a tendency of a nation to take their direction for what's ethically right by laws are passed, by what laws are passed or what society condones. So, someone's like, when same-sex marriage was passed, from the Supreme Court, my dad said to me, well, it's the law of the land, it must be right. It doesn't, the assumption is just because something is legal, it's therefore moral. That's not necessarily true, as we know, because we know that when Roe was fully functioning, since abortion was legalized in 1973, there's been over 62 or 64 million babies that have been lost. Okay. As of 2020, I have the statistic here, 930,160 abortions were performed, up 8% from 862,320 in 2017. Of course, if you look at the graphs, obviously abortions sometimes are higher than other periods, sometimes they're increasing, sometimes they're level, it just depends. But the point is that obviously some people assume, that if something, is passed by, put into law, that it must be right. We know that the Dred Scott versus Sanford decision, 1857, perpetuates slavery in the United States, right? Well, that obviously wasn't morally right. So I hope people aren't taking their cues all the time from just because something's made legal that it makes it morally right. So when the Supreme Court decision of Dobbs versus Jackson, Roe versus Wade was reversed, as we know, if you haven't been paying attention, it was put back to the states, for the states to decide. Obviously, some people don't like that. Some people think it's a good thing. Some people think it's a bad thing. Some people want a administration that will put a national ban on abortion. Obviously, many people who are pro-choice are abhorred by that. But as of now, it's gone back to the states. But the decision, obviously that it's, people are, there's people that want Roe back, want something like Roe to come back. I mean, I know that there's current people in the political realm that have said that. They want full, no restrictions at all abortion access across the board all over the place. We know in some states abortion has been banned. We know that just depends on a state-to-state basis, but we know that many on one side of the debate really hated that, and they think that was terrible, but it was never a constitutional right to abortion anyway. Constitution never mentioned abortion as a right. So the Roe thing was wrong to begin with. Okay, so as a Christian, if you think Roe was a good thing, then we're going to have to do some more apologetic training, I guess. Okay. I mean, I really do think we need to go deeper on what Roe was. If you don't know what happened with Roe. Okay. Um, but it is true, the question becomes, do laws change people's minds about abortion? Does all this legislation, if we get more legislation passed or less legislation passed or whatever. Now, I think we probably know that politically we have two parties that are not. One party is certainly supposed to be the pro-life party, and they've certainly bended and compromised on that in some ways, as we know. But another party is just absolutely obsessed with abortion, and they want to do all kinds of things with abortion. And so, but it's tragic because obviously that, if you're going to make the intentional killing of an innocent human being the main thing, that's what your main thing politically. You want that to be enacted everywhere. No restrictions everywhere. Just we want full access to abortion everywhere. You have to think that through, especially as a Christian. If you think that's a good thing, you really got to think that through. But I'm not saying that both sides have it. One side, like I said, is compromised as well, but they're not near as pro abortion as another side. I think that's just clear as day. But when government passes laws for the good of society, I'm sorry, they're supposed to pass laws for the good of society and what's best for future generations. Okay, so every law legislates a moral position. Okay, and so when people say you can't legislate morality, it just means that you should make laws based on your morality instead of, or they want my morality legislated. But yeah, government passes laws and they're all moral positions. But definitely we know that passing good laws and having good government will never be enough to change society. Because we know that Israel had a lot of good laws, but we know they didn't keep them. And we know they sinned and it brought God's judgment. And we know that winning a specific election is not going to change the human heart on abortion. Okay. It's an issue of conscience. It's an issue of someone's conscience, where that's an issue of their heart. It's an issue of getting the correct information. It's an issue of them being really informed about what abortion is. Some people still don't even know what abortion is. They have no idea. But laws strictly have a teaching function. So they're deterrence. They're only deterrence. They don't really change the human heart. So yes, they prohibit certain behaviors, and some laws obviously save lives, obviously. That's important. But we have to have laws, obviously, but obviously they don't really sometimes get to the heart of the issue. Okay, they don't really change the human heart. I mean, we could have all the pro-life legislation, you could have a national ban. That's not going to change people from wanting to get abortions. Okay, not going to stop people. Yes, it will prohibit them legally, but it's not going to stop people from having a bad sexual ethic. Because we know the heart of the issue is people don't have a good sexual ethic. And the church is supposed to lead the way on a good sexual ethic, and we haven't led the way, or maybe we tried to lead the way and it's not working. And so when people don't have a good sexual ethic, they're going to be sexually engaged. And if they're sexually engaged, there's a good chance, or there's always a chance they're going to get pregnant. And that's just the reality of the situation. So we need to do better on promoting a better sexual ethic. We're doing that. There's a lot of education out there. There's a lot of things happening, but certainly we have a long ways to go. So laws won't completely fix the issue. So no matter how much one political party promises, something or do this and something happens. I mean, the reversal of Roe obviously saved lives, but if you look what happened after Roe was reversed, you had now the pro-abortion advocates just went full tilt. I mean, they became more fervent and more aggressive, and the pro-life movement is just having to work even harder now, right? because it just almost energized the reversal road, just energized the pro-abortion advocates. So I can tell you, people on the pro-life, people that are out there doing it, Roe did not fix all the problems. Okay, I mean, it certainly saved some lives for sure, but it's certainly, our work is an uphill battle. The pro-life ministry, the work is an uphill battle. Now, when you have pro-life ministries, some of them show visual images. I know a group that does this. My daughter worked for a group as an intern who does this, and perhaps you've seen some of them, where they will show up at certain public places, maybe campuses or other places, and show abortion images, of dismembered kids, as you can see there. I know this is graphic. I'm sorry, but I have to make a point. The reason they do this is because many, many people do see this and their minds are changed, because a lot of people don't even know what abortion is. They don't understand it's the dismembering of a child. Okay, they don't even have any clue. Okay, and so, believe it or not, while some people obviously are, offended by this, the site, just like you show Holocaust victims or slavery or some genocide, it sticks in people's minds. And how many people, I can tell you, walk up to these groups and say, I had no idea this really is what abortion is. They had no idea. Okay, and so it can be very, very powerful. Because like I said, the average person just thinks it's a harmless procedure, doesn't hurt anybody, just who cares. But these ministries, whether you agree with them or not, the visual images do have an impact in changing people's minds. Because the reality of it is that the best way to help people understand abortion is education. It's by talking to them, explaining what abortion is, having one-on-one discussions. That is certainly one of the best ways to inform people, and help people to have a change of view on it, of course. Now, another argument that comes up a lot is that, a few more here, then we'll wrap up, but men have no moral authority to speak on abortion. I've certainly heard women say this. They'll say, you're not a woman, you don't understand. I get it, to a certain extent. But you're really just attacking the person. That's called an ad hominem. You're not really attacking the position of the issue, okay? The position is back to the argument here. This is the argument. I want to see you attack that argument, okay? I don't, whether a man speaks about it, gender has no bearing on whether this argument is sound and valid, okay? So, I understand a woman's the one that has to go through it. Actually, a man has to go through it too if he's involved, because he's the one that is part of the problem. So men sometimes do, of course, have a big emotional stake in it as well. But this is the issue, the crux of the issue. So, obviously the issue has, not always, gender doesn't really have any bearing on that argument, okay? As I say here, gender perspectives on abortion help us understand personal experience, but they're no substitute for rational inquiry. So anyway, now, as I said before, pro-life advocates seem like we come across as only favoring the baby and don't seem to be pro-women. That's not true at all. I don't know any pro-life advocate that does not care about the woman just as much as the child. It is true that there is a high suicide rate for women that have an abortion. Studies show that about 80% of women would not have chosen abortion if they had felt more supported. And so it's obvious that the church needs to be able to come alongside vulnerable women, vulnerable children, vulnerable families, and help them to seek life. And the question is, how can we be a culture that makes abortion not only unthinkable, but unnecessary, just as something that's not even on the agenda, because we are a church and a people and a community comes around the vulnerable population. So, as I said, there are many churches and many ministries that help women, but obviously there needs to be a lot more work in that area. Women need to know they have the support they need. Obviously, if they don't feel they have any support, then that's going to be a huge problem, because statistically it shows that when I talk about why do women get abortions, 74% say that having a baby would interfere with work, school, or the ability to care for dependents. 73% say they cannot afford a child. 48% say they do not want to be a single parent or having problems with their husband or partner. Less than 0.5% of women who have abortions cite rape as a primary reason for the abortion. Less than 0.5% of women who have an abortion say they become pregnant as a result of incest. So, I hope that, the churches and Christians and ministries can come alongside women, help talk to them, and certainly be a resource so then they know that someone's there. Obviously, that's the ideal thing. And it is true that, we don't want to confuse the difference between what we call good apologetics and compassionate care, okay? Because, you can have good arguments for pro-life positions. You can rationally walk someone through it. You can, there's all kinds of abortion debates online, and that's using rational argumentation, which is needed. But, if you're dealing with a female who is scared about the pregnancy, and scared to be a parent and really, really worried and having a lot of problems, anxiety and just what to do, and they have nowhere to turn, then we need to have that compassionate care, and I certainly know there are places that can do a better job than I can with listening, mirroring, and doing crisis intervention, things like that, than I could. But certainly, we need to understand that we need both of these things. And obviously, when you're talking to, a person in a situation that, when they're struggling emotionally, obviously rational arguments aren't necessarily going to help them at the time. We need to confront, there needs to be an issue. We need to talk about the moral aspects of it, but we need to talk about the practical aspects of it. And of course, help them emotionally with support. So there's multiple things that need to happen. I need to take a multifaceted approach. And then finally, let me mention this. Some people say that when it comes to voting, or just in general, Christians only care about one issue, which is abortion. Only one life issue, which is abortion. What about other life issues like war, poverty, drugs, slavery, immigration? Immigration is causing the death of many people right now, illegal immigration. Obviously, there's people being murdered, human trafficking, drugs. That's a life issue. Drugs kills people. Obviously, we have a huge drug problem in the United States. We have people going into war. Should we have those wars? People are being killed. The problem is that the unborn doesn't have a voice at all. Okay, the unborn can't make a choice. The unborn cannot choose to leave their country and come over here, or whether it's legally or illegal or legal. The unborn can't choose whether to take drugs to kill themselves or be in poverty or go to war. I once had a friend that tried to compare abortion to, why don't you care about people going into war? I'm like, people that go into war make a choice to go in the military. They make a choice. If they go in the military and enlist, there's a chance you're going to have to go into war. So you made a choice. The unborn have no choice in anything. Okay. So to compare that, to assume that the unborn, that the protection of the unborn is the exact same as these other things is simply a faulty comparison. But I'd also say, what's your evidence that Christians don't care about any of these other issues? Why do you assume that? I don't know. I know kinds of Christians and ministries are involved in trying to help with poverty, drugs, slavery, human trafficking, and immigration. So I'm not sure why you're saying that. I don't know. What's your evidence for that? So that's how I would respond to that. Okay, folks. Well, that's about it. There's obviously a lot more I could mention, but I highly recommend that you do go back if you want to get Scott's book at the beginning, The Case for Life. That's a really good book to start out with. The second edition, which just came out of the last year, and of course, Francis Beckwith's life is a good one. And if you really want to know what happens at Planned Parenthood, please get Abby Johnson's book. It might not hurt. She worked there. So, I by no means can cover everything here tonight, but feel free to go to prolifetraining.com. There's more information there. So having said that, that's about it. I'll stop recording.
Eric, can I ask you?
Hold on a minute. Hold on.
Oh.
Just